I wish someone told me sooner that most people don't pay attention at the poker table. My first few live sessions were filled with anxiety because I thought people were going to read my soul. But what if there was a way when they did pay attention, they focused on the things that you wanted them to? Things that pushed the edge to your favor. I'm talking about the dark psychology used in poker. And in this video, we're going to go over 5 dark psychology tactics and 1 soft sell approach to manipulating your poker opponents. These techniques can be used in your next session, and you may already be familiar with a few. You just didn't know it was happening. Can you trick your villain into telling you what he had? Announce that you knew they had a different hand, which is unlikely. Right? If the flush gets in there, somebody makes a big bet, you fold, and you go, ah, 3 of a kind's good. You know, say something that doesn't really make sense. The flush card, the front door flush comes in on the river and you bomb it. Like a set usually isn't gonna just bomb it, right? So people usually tell the truth because they want to be understood. So if you say, oh, set's good here, sometimes they might be like, oh, I didn't have a set, why would I do that, right? Like, I had a flush, like, you know, they might just want to tell you because they want to be perceived as a trusting person, as a truthful person. Even though they didn't lie, they just bet. If you want to be more vague, you could say something like, nice bluff, right? And people might defend themselves if it was a value hand. They might not want to feel like people think they're somebody who bluffs because they feel like it's dishonest. I mean, this is live poker, right? We're not talking about online poker, right? We're talking about live poker, and there's still people that don't like to bluff because they feel like it's lying. Thank you, poker gods. Another thing you can do is ask what they have on the river when you have a decision.
Why'd you call the turn?
I have a pair.
You have a pair?
Yeah.
Pair of 6s?
Let's say the board pair's on the river. You say, oh man, you got 4 of a kind, or you got a flush, or you got a full house, right? Say something strong, you got a full house. If they start denying value hands, right, that they have a specific value hand, like, oh, you got a full house, and you go, no full house. If they start discounting value hands from their range, it's usually a signal of strength, right? You can act accordingly afterwards, because if you're bluffing, you don't want to rule that out, right? If somebody says, oh, you got a full house after you bet and you're bluffing, could have a full house, could have a flush. Like, you want to keep those strong hands in there. You don't want to be like, could have a full house, could have a busted straight draw, could have 4 of a kind, right? Like, I didn't feel comfortable saying that, even though this is a made-up hand, right? So it's harder to do it. Negreanu can do it, but we're not trying to be Negreanu, we're trying to be ourselves. The false tell. I'm gonna give you one right now. Can you tell what it is? So if you're staring at your opponent after making a significant bet, sometimes it can be interpreted as like a strong win, weak tell. If you're staring at somebody after you make a big bet and you're bluffing, it's like you're trying to tell them to fucking fold, right? It's one of those things that you can reverse on somebody, especially in America. If you look at somebody longer than like a second, like they're gonna be like, what are you looking at, right? So if you're staring at somebody after making a big bet, they might think you're bluffing, especially if it's a spot with like, where they don't think they would bet for value. You know, you can put the old reverse on them, and sometimes it'll work. Target shooting. This is a cool one. It's taken straight from this book. Right here. Robert Cialdini. I think I'm saying that right. Persuasion. All right, so here we're gonna get real manipulative. If you ask someone if they're dissatisfied with Pepsi, all right, they're most likely to agree or find reasons why they're dissatisfied. If you want an unbiased answer, you're better off asking an open-ended question for a less, open-ended question. Or giving them a choice. Like, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with Pepsi? But if you want to lead your opponent down a shoot You can mention phrases or scenarios that are in the realm of what you want your opponent to be thinking about. So an example could be like saying loud enough that everybody can hear, I feel like a big pot is brewing, or I feel like we're due for a big one. You could get them to start thinking about it or having a feeling, right? A feeling, talking about this feeling like a big pot is going to be play starts the target shooting process for people at the table. It may influence a person to play a hand more aggressively, therefore building a larger pot. You lay the seed. It could be an easy way to get a round of straddles going or influence someone else to put the straddle on who may not have, right? So you can do this also by like asking a question, just a broad question, right? Like, how are we gonna play a big one if we don't get the straddle on, right? And then you put the straddle on. And then he's, yeah, right, we'll make the pots bigger. Getting the table to agree to put the straddle on in itself is a manipulation because we're manipulating the game to play twice as big, right? Creating the action. Bigger pots are worth fighting. Another one straight from Cialdini's book, creating associations. I think, therefore I link. It's gonna be similar to the target shooting one, but it has a little bit more to do with the vocabulary that you use throughout your session, right? When you hear about poker and jargon, it's usually violent and war themed. But what if you could massage the language to foster more gamble? In Cialdini's book, Persuasion, he talks about a story of where he goes into an office setting and he's gonna give his talk, but he's not allowed to use bullet points. And he's like, that's kind of weird, right? I use bullet points for everything. And they say, oh, no, you can use bullet points, but just don't call them bullet points. Call them key tasks or something, right? And the idea is that this company has done away with all the war jargon and the violent talking points in all of their language, right? So if you're coming in to give a talk, you're not going to use violence in your language, right? You're going to, so right, like things like hammer at home, we're going to crush it, all these things they don't use in their work jargon, and it works out. It works really well. What I'm saying to you is you can change your language to make people feel more optimistic about their chance of winning with drawing or marginal hands instead of waiting for premiums, right? Instead of being patient and having discipline, you can make people feel like a hero, right? So there's a multitude of stories to draw from, right? Don't talk about Icarus flying too close to the sun. Bring up David slaying Goliath. David was an underdog. Everybody looked at Goliath and said, this is gonna be a massacre, right? But David had a trick up his sleeve, right? David's the underdog, and everybody likes an underdog. So the next time that guy's looking down at 5-6 suited and there's a bet and a raise in front of him, he's thinking David. He's thinking David, 5-6 suited could crush aces, right? So you kind of get people to reframe how they're thinking about making their poker decisions. And the last one, this is a bit of a soft sell. You lay this one on every day and not many people will notice. And that's just getting people to like you. In low stakes poker, and sometimes in the high stakes as well, some players will be influenced to play a hand based on who it is they're up against. If they like you, they might subconsciously soft play a big hand. If you're someone who isn't confident in bluff catching, becoming that likable character in the game could help deter the less competitive people from taking good bluff spots or making a bet as big as they normally would. And I can tell you this works because if you flip it on its head, it can be troublesome, right? I know that there's players who don't like confrontation in my player pool. I've heard them say those words, right? So if you can put enough pressure on them early in a hand, they'll just give up. They don't want to deal with it, right? They just, I don't know if they got bullied as a kid or their parents badgered them too much when they were growing up, but the idea of fighting for a pot, which is good poker sometimes, they don't want to do it. It's uncomfortable. It feels wrong to them. They don't want to deal with it. So how do you be that person, right? You be polite. You tell jokes. You get somebody's attention when the server walks by to make sure that they don't miss ordering a drink, right? You tell them you're going to check when you really want to bluff, but you like them, so you won't. You share a slightly embarrassing story. You know, this could be made up, could be real. I tell a story about spilling hot coffee on myself during a big river decision. I wasn't sure if this was gonna be a hero call or not, but one of the reasons you may make a hero call or not is, you know, you just don't want to pay that guy off, right? So if you're wrong, you might feel a little embarrassed. And since I already spilled coffee on myself, it's already embarrassing in front of all these people. You can't even hold a cup of coffee. What do you need, kid? You need a sippy cup? So I decided I'm already embarrassed. I make the call anyways. I'm wrong. Oh well, can't get any worse. Usually gets a laugh on my expense. Is it a true story? Is it not? Do any of these sound familiar? If you got some value from this video, bink the like button, consider subscribing for more, and check out this video.